Greetings, attendees, and welcome. If you could please type in your name and where you're tuning in from in the comments box, much appreciated. Like this video so others in your network can enjoy the content. Welcome to IFMA's latest benchmark installment, the Africa Operations and Maintenance Benchmark Report webinar. Today's webinar examines the highlights from the report, which is located in the IFMA store. The report is available for purchase. IFMA members pay $195. Non-IFMA members, $245. Participants in the study receive a free complimentary copy of the final report. Today's presenters are Jake Smithwick, PhD, Associate Professor, Graduate Program Director, Construction and Facilities Engineering at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. Nneka Ubi, Graduate Student, Construction and Facilities Engineering Department at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. Today's panelists are Mike Maffa, Botswana, with the Kago Facility Solutions, FM Consultant, Dr. MKO Balugan, Nigeria, GMD CEO at Global Property and Facilities International Limited, Samuel Kwabena Asare, Ghana, FM Specialist, Ghana Airports. Jake, over to you.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Nick, and thank you all for being here today. This has been a very exciting project to work on, and it's been a lot of fun. We've got a lot of really interesting results, and I'm also especially thankful for our panelists here today to offer their insights and perspectives. So with that said, we'll go ahead and jump in. Today's agenda, we'll go through a brief introduction about benchmarking and what that means. We'll walk through the benchmarking process and what that means to you as a facility professional. Walk through some of the demographics of the facilities that we collected data on. We'll talk about janitorial and maintenance cost and a conclusion and call to action. And just like we've had several folks, if you're on LinkedIn or YouTube or Facebook or whatever channel you're watching this, be sure to like this, be sure to provide us where you're located, city and state or country. That'd be fantastic because we always want to meet more people. So a little bit about our research team here, the Simplar Foundation. So as was mentioned, both myself and Nneka are at the University of North Carolina in Charlotte. We also have a much broader team of folks from multiple universities. And the main focus that we're on here is how do we identify and provide better value to the industry overall. We primarily work in procurement and facility management and everything that's attached to that, right? So it's been a lot of fun, and it's been, yeah, it's been great. It's been really enjoyable. The reason why I want to talk about just a brief history lesson about how we got started with this is that in 2016, we kicked off and finished in 2017 the Operations and Maintenance Benchmark Report for North America. And since then, it has expanded to a number of other reports. In 2018, we had the qualitative report. We had the space planning report. I will tell you that this particular report, the space planning report in 2020, was really interesting because, as we all know, in March of 2020, basically the entire world shut down. And so this data here, we literally finished collecting data for this particular report about space occupancy and different metrics related to that. I think it was like 2 weeks before everything shut down. So if you're looking for a really good benchmark of how things used to be before COVID, that report certainly provides a lot of data. We're also currently updating that report and be on the lookout for that in the coming months. Global SAR report, Asia report, and then the Middle East Operations and Maintenance report. We've seen a lot of different areas. IFMA has a strong, a strategic objective to provide insights into different areas throughout the world, and Africa is just the latest area that we are working on. So the last thing I wanted to comment before I hand over to Nneka is why benchmarking, and really what this is looking at here, right? If you go through the report that we provided, there's a lot of very detailed information, a lot of metrics by different currencies and different practices as a facility professional. The intent of this benchmarking exercise is to help you identify opportunities for improvement. Many times what we see that as people look at this data, they think, wow, this is really neat, but they don't do anything with it. So when you think about benchmarking, and the best way to leverage that is to help your organization do something with that information, to make a cost savings initiative, to make an effort to modify how you deliver certain practices inside of your facility. This report has also been majorly focused on FM expertise throughout Africa. In fact, NECA, who's going to come up here in a minute, has several years of experience, full-time experience in Nigeria, and her insights, along with our panelists and other folks that are involved in the project, have really helped us identify the key things that are crucial as we begin to look at that. So with that said, I will turn the time over to NECA, who's going to walk us through the methodology. NECA, go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening from wherever you are tuning in from across the globe. So, the Operations and Maintenance Benchmarking Project has been one of IFMA's long-standing projects. So, over the years, IFMA continuously review the questions to suit the trends in the FM industry. And for the Africa project, we had to review questions from North America reports just to suit the African climate. So this survey was passed on to subject matter experts who reviewed, made input, and it was pilot tested. After that, it went live in January 2023, specifically the last week in January. And all IFMA and non-IFMA members filled the survey. So what this means is there wasn't necessarily a requirement to fill the survey. So once you're a facilities management professional or you're in the facilities management industry and you also had a facility you were actively managing for a full year, you were qualified to fill the survey. By the end of May, we received 354 responses. And I think this is the first of its kind where IFMA is presenting data in multiple currencies. That's more than one currencies. So we had to select currencies from the top 5 participating countries just to promote inclusivity. The data are presented in mints across board. Moving on, we'll be looking at the facilities description. So for the industry sector, one thing we did was to do a major categorization. We categorize industry into 3 sectors. We have the services sector, we have the manufacturing, and the institutional. Services are like the healthcare, the banking, the telecom industry, information services, while manufacturing, it's the production, those that produce things, right? So we have motor vehicles, energy. Then we move on to the institutional, where we have charitable foundations, religious, and a lot more. So what we'll notice is, can you please go back to the last slide? Thank you. So we also did another categorization where we ask FM what class of buildings they managed. So it's either they manage a single building or they manage a space within a building. So what that means is you have this building and maybe you have like 10 offices in that building, but as an FM, you only manage one of the offices in that building. We also had facility managers that managed multiple buildings in one locations, typically called campus. Then we also have those that manage multiple buildings across multiple locations. Yeah, we also try to look at the data across different countries just to see what the geographic dispersion is. About 18 countries participated in this survey. We have the highest respondents from Nigeria with about 157 people, followed by Ghana and South Africa and a lot more others. Next we did was we grouped these countries into regions. We looked at South Africa, Central Africa, North Africa, and East Africa. West Africa had the highest response rate at 64%, with Central Africa having the least responses. We also try to categorize the facilities according to the age. In terms of age, if you look at the towards the end left from my screen, you see facilities that are less than 5 years. What this typically means is we ask facility managers, how old are your facilities? For some, they were able to provide accurate dates. For some, they were able to provide a range of dates, right? What we found here is that unlike the North America reports where they had about 45% of the buildings being above 50 years, here we have barely 4% of the facilities above 50 years. You could see from 51 to 70 years, then down to the right. So at the top right, you see where it said the average age of the facilities in this data is 20 years and the median is 15 years. Whereas for North America, the average age is 52 years and the median is 48 years. We also try to categorize this facility age according to service industry, like I mentioned, the manufacturing and the institutional. Next, we looked at space management. We also provided data about what type of spaces are managed and how they are managed. Now, regarding how spaces are managed, whether it's leased as a tenant, owned and occupied, owned, occupied, and partially leased to others. We just also further broke it down to different types of facilities. So you could see at let's take for example the single building. So for a single building, we try to see of the number of respondents we have for single building, how many percentage is leased as a tenant, how many are owned and occupied, right? Somewhere in the report, in the field report, how this was helpful to us was we're able to see the different maintenance and janitorial costs with respect to how these buildings were owned. Next slide, please. So, yeah, also on space management, we assess the square meter per occupant. What this means is for every square meter, how many occupants it's in that space. We try to assess this by in percentile. So when you say percentile, what you mean is you have this array of data from, let's say you sort it out, and you take out like the 1%, and the rest 99%, we try to look at it. Or you also want to look at the 1 percentile. So you have this array of data, you take out the 99% and you look at the 1%. So what we found is that the mean interior square meter per occupant is about 9% more than what was reported in the IFMA North America report. For this data set, we also expanded it by industry sector. So for those in the space management or design, this will really be beneficial. Overall, what the purpose of these demographic factors is to enable us to view operations and maintenance costs from multiple spectrums. So we're able to, with this demographic, we're able to view maintenance and janitorial costs with respect to location, with respect to size, with respect to use of the building, with respect to the age of the building. Yeah, so we can move on to the next. Oh, I think you are muted.
All this years and I still forget to unmute myself. Sorry about that, folks. One thing I really like, NECA, is how you talked about the spectrum of differences across Africa and different perspectives. And I want to start off with our panel here, and maybe for Sam first, that what differences do you see in facility management by different regions throughout Africa? Sam, would you mind addressing that question and offering your thoughts and perspectives about that?
Oh, okay. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all. Yes, the presentation has just gone smoothly, indicating the differences. And from my perspective, I think one of the key ones that come to mind is the fact that depending on how public entities, which largely are the people that facilities management impact on, how they are able to put in place policies that are going to guide national assets and national developments, rather than we having these developments coming up and then later we finding a way of taking care of them. So in perspective, region by region, it's going to be largely dependent on the area of public facilities or public entities, public organizations, seeing the need and the relevance, and then setting up these policies that will input or involve facilities management as much as possible. This will be very key, and this will differ from national to national in the country, in the region that we find ourselves. That's a very key one. Maybe if to add one more from my end too, I'll also say that the disconnect between development and facilities management. If you're able to build your organization, or let's say your nation, to the point where there's a good connection between the facilities management team and the developers, it will be very good. It will depend on the nationals and how we work together to make sure that we have this connect instead of the disconnect that normally exists between those who set up or acquire these facilities and then those of us FMs who are responsible for managing it. So these are few ones that I think from my end will differ from one in the region that we find ourselves.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah.
Mike, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, I know you're a consultant. You've worked in a couple different areas. What do you see some of the major differences when you think about different geographic differences from an FN standpoint?
For me, I'd say the climate is quite a key element. Throughout Africa, we've got the tropics, we've got the dry areas, particularly access to water supply. For instance, temperatures that we experience. So in that way, you find that areas probably in the southern part of Africa, Namibia, South Africa, and so forth, it's largely dry, and there's a kind of climate, and as a result, indoor air quality issues are very, very important. When you get to availability of water, for example, that means the kind of costs are largely in trying to bring down the cost of utilities. Now we are also experiencing electricity problems in South Africa, and so there's a lot of focus in that, bringing down costs in that area, and going into recycling when we talk about water. Just getting into these utilities. And like I say, extreme temperatures now that we experience. So HVAC becomes, a huge factor. So I think in terms of the elements that are associated with what we look at in regarding service maintenance, they vary in that way.
Sure.
So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you both. I really liked how you talked about the geographic differences tied to weather conditions, environmental conditions certainly plays an impact, and also, of course, how it relates to the different national versus local level conditions certainly has an impact. One of the things that obviously has an impact on lots of folks is certainly COVID-19, and Mecca's going to spend a few minutes talking about the impacts of COVID-19 on facility operations. Mecca, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I think by now COVID-19 may be sounding like a broken record, right? I mean, it's over 3 years, but we definitely cannot ignore the effects or the impacts it made while it lasted. Um, for me personally, so this is a personal opinion. It's not a data we collected. Pre-COVID-19, I would say, first of all, I was in Nigeria when COVID hit, and I would say that the whole remote work thing wasn't so popular in Nigeria. I cannot really say for other parts of the country, other parts of the continent. But I, for one, I can't really remember any one of my friends that had a full-time remote job or a hybrid job. I mean, the subject matter experts can also give their thoughts on that later on. So I would say that the whole remote working thing was one of the outcomes of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we try to access facilities managers' perspective, how they manage the situation, and also the lessons learned. This data set has been collected from other regions, so we also felt it would be beneficial to have facilities managers in Africa share their thoughts. So we asked facility managers if all employees will return to work after COVID-19. 38% said yes, everybody will return to work. 54% said some will return, some will be at work, right? 7% said that there will be all remote workers. We try to compare this with the North American data, which is the small spheres below it. And we have 50% from North America saying everybody will return to work, which is lesser than what we have in Africa. And 74% said some will be back, some will be at home, and 11% said there will be all remote work. One thing we also did was to ask for lessons learned, and we randomly chose one, and I will just read it out. He said, one of the respondents said, the biggest lesson learned is that facility managers, which didn't have as much value placed on them in the general output of the organization, turned out to be among the essential workers during outbreak. I quite agree with this because people were not occupying buildings, but those buildings needed to be running, and so that we don't come back and have to see things that will definitely shoot the budget. So we also tried to analyze the data, the data with respect to the changes to the building footprint. So we asked facility managers if there were changes to their footprint with respect to COVID-19. 13% said they are not sure. 29% said footprint is changing, but it has nothing to do with COVID. 18% said yes, footprint has dropped, but due to COVID, while 35% said nothing has changed. It's as if COVID never happened. So 5% also said the footprint has been increasing due to COVID. We further try to categorize these with respect to the various industries. I think this data set is also will also be of interest to those that manage spaces. It could also give you an idea to, oh, what is how have the building footprint reduced with respect to the services sector, the manufacturing sector, the institutional sector. I think I have a note down. If you just do one more click. Okay, so one categorization we did of the facilities, which is different from the industry categorization, industry sector categorization, is facility use. So we also try to group these facilities to what do you use this facility. So we have those that use their facilities for educational purposes, for industrial, for laboratory, offices, and recreational. So what we found was that offices had the highest reduction in footprints due to COVID-19.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nick. You know, I really appreciate everybody's comments on the live stream here so far. We've got some really good, interesting conversation going on. One user on the chat box said that, you know, even with all the talk on climate change, FMs are still not involved in those discussions, and they're the ones who are responsible for the resilience of these facilities, right? And I think that Carlton has a really good response to that, is that FM involvement at the development stage is imperative to allow that productivity, not just in climate change, but broadly that involving FMs early on in that process and bringing that value to the organization is absolutely crucial. And I think this kind of leads to our next major question for our panels, and I'll call on Dr. MKO first here, is that from a remote work standpoint or having to do something differently as an organization, what are your thoughts about the ability of FMs or maybe the entire organization to work remotely. Dr. MKO, what are your thoughts about telework and remote work? Any perspectives on that?
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Good day, everybody, from wherever you're joining from. Before I answer that question, I want to just make some contribution on the COVID, as well as on the industry African-wide differences. One of the key things, and some of them have been mentioned, is the level of development and awareness and the level of data of FM, across various regions in Africa. They are different, and you can see from the data collected, west, south, central, in that order, shows you the level of acceptance, the level of development, the level of awareness of FM. This also contributes to, the role of facilities managers, which will lead me to the next question about COVID. Part of the fallout of COVID, which was also mentioned in the survey, is that there are now more recognition for facilities managers because of the health and safety, component that is required, and knowing that these are the guys who can deliver, the highest level of safety and good environment for workers, and also the fact that organizations are also, paying attention to the efficiency of space, unlike before. I know before COVID came, a lot of companies were already thinking about, how to optimize, how to, ensure that their space are more efficient. But, COVID also threw that up and gave the FM the challenge as well as the opportunity to demonstrate their knowledge and skills, around that area. And that takes me to the current question about remote work and telework. What's the role of FM? So in two sense, FMs can work both ways. You can either work, support organizations. We do multiple buildings across multiple markets, across multiple locations. You are not expected to be in every building. So technology helps you to see what's going on everywhere. You can remotely, monitor what's going on and provide support and intervention where necessary. Also to support organizations who have institutionalized remote work and telework. These are part of the things that facility managers are expected to develop their competence and capability to do, provide ideas and support to ensure that the organization is getting value for the investment in technology that help the organization to achieve that. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. MKO. Sam, I know you've got kind of another perspective here too about remote work and hybrid work. What are your experiences or thoughts about that?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, so rightly to continue from where my colleague left off, is that fact that both will work with FMs. I mean, you can telework if the systems are in place, and you could also do unable to telework if the right systems are not in place. For instance, to be able to do that, we need a robust system in an organization or in a nation that really wants to champion or pursue telework with FM. You need a robust system. I mean, we being able to measure work hours, being able to measure work output, is a system that just needs to be in place. And the FMs can telework, but where we are unable to do that, or FMs are unable to do that, then it will be just like we said earlier, be linked to the fact that maybe at the development stage for whatever systems you are responsible for, FMs were not involved as much. But it's both ways. I mean, we are able to do that, and then we will also have a shortfall if the right systems are not in place. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sam. And it kind of goes along with one of our attendees, Carlton, has said that, technology is an FM's best friend, right? But sometimes, as we all know, you got to have boots on the ground. You have to have people on the ground that are actually doing things to add to that value, right? It's hard to fix things if we're not physically there to actually deal with that. So really good comments from our group here so far. So the next thing we wanted to shift to is sustainable operations and maintenance and some of the outcomes. And really, this is a developing area, I would think. And with that said, Nneka, take it away.
Yeah. Yeah, we looked at different practices and how operations and maintenance activities are being carried out with respect to sustainability, one of which is green certification. So when I say green certification, what I mean is like green rating. This is what is used to indicate the level of environmental friendliness for real estate properties. So the question is, how environmental friendly are your buildings, or what activities have you inculcated to promote the green status of your building? So when we ask about green certification, what it means is, have you taken on any certification? Some of those certifications could include LEED, EcoCert, Green Star, and any other related program. Facilities, of course, were classified by industry, services, manufacturing, and institutional. We looked at facilities that have no green elements, which is like the first one to the left. Then the next, we looked at facilities that have plans for certifications. Then next is facilities that have green elements but no certification. Then lastly but not the least, those facilities that have one or more buildings that are certified. What we found is that facilities in the services sector, about 65%, had more certified buildings. So in an array, you have the services, you have the manufacturing, and you have the institutional. So over 51% of institutional sector said they had no green elements. Next thing we also looked at with respect to sustainability, it's green janitorial practices. We try to find out activities carried out by facilities managers to ensure that their janitorial practices are green. We ask question on if their staff or contracts, if they had staff or contract services that were trained for green cleaning, if the janitorial procedures are audited on periodic basis, if green cleaning procedures are documented, and we also asked if they even have any at all. Next, we looked at recycling programs. We tried to track recycling programs. We asked what percentage of our respondents recycle either paper, plastic, light bulbs, batteries, computer parts, carpets, and all of that. In comparison, the use of recycling program is generally lower in Africa compared to that of North America. But however, paper ranked the highest also in North America. So in the North America report, when the question was asked about items that were recycled, paper also ranked the list. The full report provides more data about that.
And Nick, I
Still
think
on,
one reason that we do focus on the North America data is because it's been around for such a long time, right? I mean, that's been around for 30, 40 years,
yes,
and there's a lot of
absolutely.
data. So as purely as a comparison point, that's kind of why we tend to reference back to North America. Tell us about energy management practices.
So we assessed the level of integration of some energy management practices. We asked respondents if they were using any of we provided about 48 energy management practices, and we asked them questions to know which they use and all. Across board, we observed that every single one of the practices were used in Africa. Although for some, the rate of usage may be significantly low, like you have for installed computerized with irrigation controllers underwater, and also like still underwater, we have planted drought tolerant plants. For some of the management practices, the usage is also high, just like under equipment and control, we have adjusting operations, the operating hours of the HVAC. So just like Dr. Smithwick said, we try to compare that with the North America, which is the latest report on the North America benchmarking. So you see the Africa, which is the second column, and North America, the right column. We try to see the difference. So overall, you see that the energy management practices, it's higher in North America. But one interesting thing I also see here is that some of these practices are low cost, no cost. I think I took a course last semester on building energy management. It was very interesting and eye-opening because we looked at energy management practices that will cost 0 naira, 0 Ghana cedis, zero South African rand to achieve, right? Things like turning off the lights, right? In my building, we have, I think the light switches, you just have a little note that said, please turn me off. Yeah, everybody may not see that, but I want to guess that for every 10 people that pass through that place, about 2 or 3 people may see that and turn it off. So some of these practices don't really require much.
Absolutely.
Yeah, other practices we looked at included building envelope, renewable energy, which can be found in the full report.
Fantastic. And again, our chat box here is certainly very active here today. One of the questions is we're going to get a copy of the videos, and yes, this will be all posted on LinkedIn and the other channels as well. So you definitely have a copy of this report. One of the next question I wanted to go through our panel here, and maybe we'll kick things off with Mike, is how do you think FMs can participate in the advocacy of global warming or responding to climate change, decarbonization? What are some key things that, as an FM, that we can start doing to help respond to and better manage the energy that we do have? Mike, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Jake. I think we as facilities managers now, we need to stress that now we are not just looking at facilities management, but sustainable facilities management. So it's up to every facilities manager to ensure that as they practice facilities management in their daily lives, they practice sustainable facilities management, going through the IFMA sustainability components. If regarding water, what do I do? Regarding electricity, what do I do? Indoor air quality, what do I do? NECA also just mentioned on issues of recycling, paper, what do we do? As well as issues of sustainable procurement, ensuring that what the organization buys is produced sustainably. So just looking at all this holistically, and training is of paramount importance. SFP, for example, I've noticed a lot of guys that have attained SFP, myself included, the attitude was completely different after attaining that qualification or credential. So I would say training is extremely important. We need to ensure that our personnel, those that are working in the facilities management, are trained so that they get to appreciate. We also need to have sustainability champions throughout the workplace, ensure that there is behavioral change, that we've got these teams that will ensure that knowledge is spread all over the facility, and people are part of that. Gone are the days when we look at sustainability issues as just common sense, but it's something that we need to practice. We need to have milestones. We need to actively participate, and you'd find again across our continent. There are few people that do have SFPs, lead qualifications, and all this, and these are critical when we look at taking an active part, as well as being part of all the different webinars, different kind of shows and events that take place in our different countries. We need to be exposed out there. We need to participate in all these events, all these meetings, all these publications that we produce, to ensure that we send the information, we engage with our own governments. It's a fact that in our country we've got quite a lot of abundance of sunshine, but yes, there's still a lot of electricity that is produced from coal.
Sure.
I'll just stop there, but training, knowledge is quite important.
Yeah, Mike, I really like that training perspective. That many times that if we just train things better, people can get more efficient with the staff that we have here. Dr. MKO, I wonder if you could comment a little bit about decarbonization trends you're seeing throughout the continent. What are your thoughts about that? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I think I want to align with Mike. Most of the things that you said are very, very correct. The education and understanding of the requirements is very critical. Knowledge for FM is key for us to be able to deliver the level that is required at this time. The second point I want to emphasize is taking charge. There was a question around why we're not involved at design stage. Most times clients don't even know that they're going to be useful until there's a problem. So our responsibility as FM is to sell ourselves, to clients, to government, to people, and that's part of the advocacy. We need to let them know what value we can bring to them. And then lastly, I just had like most of the time find one figure. You're asking somebody to change the way they give your credit to ensure sustainability, to focus on global warming. You need to show in the numbers. What are they currently doing? What are the things they're going to change? And what will impact do those things bring to the business in terms of cost savings and value? Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So let's kind of shift our focus now, get to some of the actual operational data. I'll ask Mike to mute himself. Thank you so much, sir. NECA, talk to us about janitorial cost, things we've seen in this space, and go ahead.
So we are currently into what I call the crux of the matter. So this doesn't mean the previous data are not relevant. Of course, we can't even be having the data, the cost data, if we did not have all of those precedents. I think everybody's interested in cost. So I think iPhone 15 was launched last week, and I had to call up a friend to more like just tease him. He's a die-hard Apple product fan. So I just called him up to like tease him. I think I saw the news immediately it was released. So, but it turned out he hadn't seen the news. And when I called, I just said, hey, iPhone 15 is out. And before I even finished, his question was, how much is it? That was not the purpose of my call. I was literally calling to tease him about the features, but despite being a hardcore fan, he was still interested in the cost. So cost is something that is of importance to facility management professionals, and especially those in C-suites. We categorize the cost data um, according to the top performing countries, like I mentioned. So we have the Nigerian Naira, the Ghana Cedi, the South African Rand, the Egyptian Pound, the Botswanan Pula. Then we also included the US dollar, especially for our global community, and maybe also for those in the African countries that will prefer to do their conversion with the US dollar. One thing I would like to say here for the currencies is that we use the official rate. So either it's called official rate or reserve bank reserve rates or central bank rates in the different countries. So for Nigeria, I think they operated two rates before sometime in July. So if your facility use the parallel market rate in Nigeria, it is recommended that you convert the US dollars, which is the second column, to the rate that you use to represent what you spent or to have an idea. So from our analysis, what we found is that the mean janitorial cost per percentile is $7, about $7. In the Nigerian Naira, it's 3,668 Naira, 92 Ghana Cedi, 142 for South African Rand, and so forth. I'll tell you for free that the data on janitorial cost, maintenance costs are quite robust, as responses were analyzed to show cost by industry, cost by facility use, cost by facility age, region, country, and a lot more. So if that sounds like what you are interested in, you should definitely check out the full report, as this presentation is just a sample of data. Okay, we looked at janitorial costs with respect to green certifications. So remember earlier in the presentation, we talked about green certification status. So you see how all of those build into our data. So we try to look at the cost with respect to how green the facilities are. So we further expanded it to check, okay, what are the costs with respect to in-house versus contracted? What are the costs with operating days of the week? When is it more expensive to carry out janitorial activities? We also checked primarily cleaning hours. Is it more cost efficient to clean in the morning, or is it more cost efficient to clean later in the day when everybody has gone? We also checked the level of cleanliness. So this level of cleanliness, I think, is the first time we are doing this, and for in this Africa project, we tried to check, oh, how would the level of cleanliness, we had about 5 levels of cleanliness in the reports.
Absolutely. And Neka, kind of, again, our comments here are just exploding here. One of the comments that I really like here about this particular issue is from Juliana. And Juliana says that sustainable facilities management is definitely the way to go in the continent. Long-term impacts would help boost the energy deficiencies occurring throughout the region, right? And again, janitorial cost, green certification is a part of that. But broadly speaking, as we've talked about today so far, is that looking at how we manage our energy is certainly an important part of that. Neka, let's talk about staffing a little bit as well. And Neka, I just want to say you're on mute. So if you can unmute
Okay,
yourself. There you go.
thank you. Another set of data we looked at were the janitorial staffing contracts. We tried to we asked respondents the what made up the contracts in a janitorial relationship. So most of them said, oh, supplies were included. About 44% said supplies were included. 40% said, oh, the contractor provided training. 40% said contractors provided equipment. 32 background checks, and 27 paper products. Next is we try to have a feel of the length of the janitorial contract. 34% said, oh, janitorial contract is usually 1 year or less. 39% said that janitorial contract is between 1 to 2 years, while 18% said that janitorial contract is 2 to 3 years. Next thing we looked at is we looked at the staffing portfolio based on size. So if you look at to the far right, you'd see the staffing portfolio to the size. It could give you an idea of how many janitorial staff, supervisors, floor crews are needed for a given size of facility.
Fantastic. And so, Neka, I think it's worth it to maybe switch gears a little bit and talk about maintenance cost. And because as an FM, right, that's a major cost component of what we think about and how we deal with that. So let's spend a few minutes talking about maintenance cost impacts and what we've seen there.
Okay, for the maintenance cost, we kind of broke it down into 6 costs, right? So we have the external building cost, which include the roof, the skin of the building. We have the interior building cost, which include the MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. We also have the roads and grounds. Landscaping is included there. We have the cost spent on utility and central system. We have the cost spent on process treatment, then all other costs. So this particular data here, it's in US dollar because it's this giant data. But I can assure you that in the report, this cost is in the 5 different countries we talked about earlier. But to my right, to see, we try to bring a summary of these total costs in those different currencies. So for the Nigerian naira, per annum, yeah, I would like to state that these costs are per annum. So per annum and per rentable square meter. So for 1 square meter space in Nigeria, the data we have per annum is that it will cost about 6,419 naira to maintain an entire space. For Ghana, we have 161 Ghana cedis. Egyptian pound, you have about 13. Then you have 181 for the Botswana pula. Again, inside the report, we provided cost per square meter, cost by facility use, cost by sector, size, location, and many more. Yes, this is one of the costs by region. So to the right is caused by the countries. I think we had about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about over 10 countries that we provided their cost in the different currencies, of course. Then we also have the cost by region. Next slide. Lastly, on maintenance for this webinar, we asked respondents about how they track their maintenance programs. We asked them the various softwares they use to track either preventive, either reactive, or predictive maintenance. As with the North American study, what we observed is that the Microsoft Excel ranked the highest. So if you look at ranked the highest with respect to software being used. So I'll just try to so the CAFM means the computer aided facilities management. The ERP is enterprise resource planning. Then we have the capital renewal, the CMMS, which is the computerized maintenance management system. And then we have manual, hard copy, and the Excel. So the ERP and the capital renewal has over time ranked the least used maintenance software. So if you also look at the last row in this slide, you also see under the ERP and capital renewal, the last row is the North American report. So you also have the ERP being 6% and capital renewal being 3%. So it ranks among the least used softwares.
Fantastic. Thank you, Neka. So maybe one final question here, and I'd like to ask Sam to think about this, is that from a technology standpoint, throughout the region, how do you think FMs can better leverage technology available to them? What resources are available? What things should we think about? Sam, any thoughts or perspectives about that? Sam, you might be on mute right now.
Yeah.
There you go.
So thank you very much. Well, the bulk of it being the fact that there's little or lack of appreciation for the value placed on using softwares for FM. And so if there's anything to do, I think this webinar is one of the things that is in the right direction, because benchmarking is very key, so that you have something to relate to. Even though you've not used softwares before, you have a benchmark to show that if I use softwares, I'll be making an improvement of my systems and even my analysis by this much. At the moment, once you don't have anything to benchmark, then your lack of appreciation or your little understanding or appreciation for using these tools will contribute to the reason that we are not having. So it's, from my perspective, it's purely the fact that we have low or lack of appreciation for these tools or software that will help us in this facilities management processes that we have. And that, to be able to solve it or to be able to improve on it, I think benchmarking, which is why we are here this afternoon or this morning, is so key. Once I know I can benchmark and I have a comparison of why, if I use Excel, the output I get, the performance values I get compared to using a CFAM, then I want to go into it. So that's my contribution on that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sam.
Yeah.
So kind of a final thoughts here as we begin to wrap up here, some key takeaways as we've kind of gone through this here. When you think about FM as an industry, is that it's certainly thriving and growing throughout the region. And with that said, there's a lot of different opportunities to look at that in terms of starting to benchmark, to recognize FM and its role broadly in the built environment. Certainly has areas for opportunities. I think the third thing also to think about here is that the ability to improve energy efficiency in our buildings throughout the region is a major area of opportunity, that there's a lot of different things that we can do here. And then actually, we're going to bring up the final slide about what we can do today to kind of move things forward here. I think it was Mike that brought this up initially, and also Dr. MKO, but education is absolutely paramount, right? We have to get our people trained, educated, and get those credentials to help leverage the skills that they do have. Technology, if used effectively, as Mr. Sam talked about, will also help us. Benchmarking and, of course, sustainability is certainly interconnected here. I wanted to call on our panel here. Mike, any final thoughts from you as we've kind of gone through the presentation and other perspectives that we should kind of think about here? Any final thoughts from you, Mike? And Mike, you're on mute.
Yes, thanks. Sorry about it. Yeah. I think like Sam just mentioned, benchmarking it's key. As much as facilities management is fairly new the world over, but I think in Africa, it's very, very new. And for sure, when we do these benchmarks through such activities, through institutions like IFMA, WM and others around, we are able to leapfrog, I would say, to
Yes.
where we need to. And I believe even in taking part in this exercise, a lot of my colleagues would say, it did open their eyes, and to be better facilities managers,
I like that.
So this is, that gone are the days where we just do estimates. We have to know, okay, how much are we spending per square meter regarding cleaning and so forth. So now we need to look at things objectively, and that is when now the bottom line would matter. It's all about bringing costs. It's all about now those emissions, and it's all about doing things in a systematic way.
Fantastic. Thank you. Dr. MKO, I would like to call on you. What are your final thoughts and perspectives about what you've kind of seen here today?
Thank first to thank the IFMA for taking the initiative.
I'll say, Dr. MK, you're kind of breaking up a little bit. I don't know if you can.
Can you hear me now?
There we go. Much better. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I was saying that this forces to thank IFMA for taking this initiative. And this is a very good project that I believe will help the FM industry in Africa understand more about what to do. The second point is there is need for education has been identified by all of us. FM education is critical, and I know also IFMA is playing a role in that space. But we need to find a way to grow. What we need to do to continue to educate and empower the FMs to be able to do the best they can. Thank you.
Fantastic. Sam, final thoughts from you about what we've kind of seen here today. Any other perspectives?
Okay, so just to add up to what has been presented, which is fantastic, the key area I will mention now is selection of best service resources. As in whether it is staffing you are selecting, whether it's a contractor you are selecting. It's a very key thing if you want to really have a better cost in terms of even janitorial or maintenance. Selecting best resources in terms of the service providers we hire, the staffing we hire, negotiation of the SLAs, and also possible the contract administration stage where you need to resolve or try to resolve disputes as they come up. These are all key to be able to put us all in a limelight where facility management will be seen, and it will be the benchmarking we are trying to achieve will be enhanced. These are my final thoughts. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sam, and thank you, everybody. I kind of final thoughts here. Other things, World Workplace in IFMA is next week in Denver, Colorado. It's going to be a fantastic event. I think it's going to be quite the large crowd this year. I don't know the exact numbers, but it should be a very, very lively group. So if you are going to be there, be sure to reach out to us. I do have a couple presentations on Thursday at 4:30. We'll be talking about the state of women in FM. This is another research project we did, and so we'll be presenting some additional results about that. And on Friday is a broader update about other research results from IFMA about space planning, return to the office, and some other initiatives as well. On behalf of IFMA and everybody else, again, we really want to thank our panelists about what we're seeing here. Both Sam, Dr. MKO, and Mike, we sincerely appreciate your time here. I also wanted to call on Nick for a final couple words here and thoughts. Nick, go ahead.
Thanks, Jake. Thank you to the panelists and your team, Jake and NECA, for this excellent opportunity and project and success. Also, thank you to our respondents, both IFMA members and non-members who participated on this study. We don't tell you that enough, but thank you for continuing to support IFMA.
Absolutely. Everybody, thank you so much for being here. We really, really appreciate your time. If you'd like a copy of the slides, be sure to reach out to us. You can send myself an email, jake.smithwick@charlotte.edu or necaubi@charlotte.edu. The last thing I'll say, this is I promise, the last word here. NECA would never say this year, but NECA is actually one of our FM Student Scholarship winners. So she will be there next week in World Workplace. So if you see NECA, give her a high five because that is fantastic. Sam, Dr. MKO, Mike, thank you all so much for being here today. Attendees, thank you for being here. And everybody, take care of yourselves. Till next time. Bye.